It's gone, hasn't he? Richard's gone.
Richard. Do you want to move? Do you want to move?
No,
Sure.
you're all right. Yeah, I'm just working out whether I need to move along one.
Can I welcome everybody to this meeting of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. We've got apologies from Councillor Sean Anstey, who's represented by Councillor Alex Williams. Apologies from Mike Owen, represented by Pat Jones-Greenhalgh. And apologies from John Lamont, represented by Bob Morris. The only announcement I've got, actually, is that there will be a photograph of leaders and chief executives at the end of our session, which will take place somewhere over by the doors there. So if you can make sure your hair and your makeup is in touch for the men, and for the women, you will look beautiful in any case. Declarations of interest, the appropriate forms there for people to use. The minutes of the Combined Authority meeting in January, they're for approval. Are they approved? They're agreed, thank you. The forward plan of strategic decisions is before us. Are they noted? They're noted. The minutes of the LEP of February before us, are they noted? They're noted, thank you. Item 7, the establishment of an independent remuneration panel. Colleagues will be aware that under the legislation that exists, in order to allow for the payment, for example, of our elected mayor in May, it's necessary for us to have a remuneration panel which will make appropriate recommendations. That remuneration panel, I've got to stress, will be independent of politicians. Then you'll see that the authority is given to the monitoring officer in consultation with me to establish, obviously in accordance with relevant statute, to ensure that independence. This is a necessary step that we need to take. Is that agreed? That's agreed, thank you. The appointment to the Greater Manchester Returning Officer. The reports before us. Liz, do you want to say anything to this?
I mean, hopefully the report is self-explanatory. We've got the CA's got an obligation to appoint a returning officer. There are functions, obviously, that will need to be carried out between now and, obviously, the election on the 4th of May.
Thanks. So this is a necessary requirement. The recommendations before us, are those agreed? They're agreed. Item 9, the appointment of external auditors. Kieran Quinn.
Yeah, Chair, thank you for this. And this is quite a simple report. It's been through a similar report. I think it's been through every council now. It's clearly something that we need to do. It's been to our audit committee as well for their input and advice, and their recommendation is that we use the public sector audit appointments limited. Most discussion, though, has been around obviously what we would want as relevant criteria for a collective procurement approach. I think it's been beneficial going forward, and I support the recommendation.
So the recommendations are as on the paper before us. Those agreed? Those are agreed. Thank you. The item 10, the Code of Corporate Governance. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, any organisation needs robust corporate governance, and part of that robustness has got to be actually the fact that it's reviewed regularly and reviewed publicly. This report, I believe, is absolutely combines all of those. It's a strong code of corporate governance, and I recommend it to the Combined Authority.
So the Code of Corporate Governance is before us, and the recommendation is to adopt it. That's agreed? That's agreed. Thank you. Item 11, changing lives through sports and physical activity. Peter Smith.
Chair, this is the result of the Memorandum of Understanding we signed in July 16. We need to get people more active. It's a great way of improving both physical and mental health. And if we can get these bids in, we can get money to support various schemes.
So the reports before us, the recommendation is as on the papers. That's agreed? That's agreed. Thank you. Item 12, the Greater Manchester Brexit Monitor. Councillor Lees, Richard Lees.
I suppose the first bit of this is a little bit of good news, which is that the report outlines that at the moment we have continued optimism from Greater Manchester firms, and companies are largely proceeding with investment and recruitment plans, but then that is heavily caveated where it says that we need to be cautious when interpreting these figures, as the full impact of the decision to leave the EU remains to be felt. I would have said actually any impact remains to be felt at the moment because we're still so early in the process. Two key national government policy announcements draw attention to. One is the Industrial Strategy Green Paper that we deal with later on our agenda. The other is the Housing White Paper, where clearly we will need to, in the future, determine a GM response to that. But nothing else on this paper, Chair.
Thanks very much. Is there any other comment? Thanks. So that report before us, it's noted. Yes, it's noted. Thank you. Item 13, the industrial strategy. Richard, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think, again, positive things. First of all, that we are to have an industrial strategy, which I think in itself is a step forward. Secondly, that there is at least an angling towards the importance of place within this industrial strategy. And again, the covering report we've got indicates that the place-space focus is much stronger than previous industrial strategies, and that is to be welcomed. I think a major concern for us is the extent to which that emphasis on place is then put into practice, and there are elements of the Green Paper that suggest that we could end up with aspects of the industrial strategy that remain siloed in the approach to growing our economy. Perhaps one example of that is the sectoral approach, and perhaps contrast it with what we've done through the Northern Independent Economic Review, where we've taken an approach that within sectors identifies strengths that are pan-northern rather than restricted to one particular locality. The past history of what's now Byers and what used to be UKTI is that they struggle with conceiving of one sector in any more than one place, which is a place-based approach, I suppose, but it's the wrong place-based approach. So I think in terms of our response, we have to be, I think, very, very strong, not just on that, but how we deliver a more effective education and skills model and other aspects of an industrial strategy through a place-based approach. The Green Paper's weak on skills. It's one of our concerns, of course, is that with the devolution of skills, we'll still only be able to exercise direction over 17% of the skills budget. We need to continue to argue for a more comprehensive approach. And I think probably, in commenting on the paper, that's... sorry, one other aspect I did want to talk about was business finance, which again I think there are weaknesses within the approach on business finance, and we really need to have a response that indicates the need for financial support for business that starts right through proof of concept and goes right through to the expansion levels. There are gaps within that. There is nothing within the Green Paper that suggests that there is any thinking seriously about how those gaps are going to be filled. So there are a lot of positives in this, Chair, but again, I think in our response we do need to challenge some of the weaknesses and fill some of the gaps.
Thanks very much. Is there any comment on this? So the strategy as outlined and the recommendations in the report, that they're agreed. Thank you. The Greater Manchester strategy, there are probably it might be helpful if I approach this in two parts. The first is to look at the first part of the recommendations. We know that both the consultation we've engaged in and the strategy, both originally outlined and modified, places some change from the original 2009 and the revised 2013 strategy, with a greater emphasis on the assets we've got. The assets, of course, being the physical assets, but also the assets of our people, and also, of course, the concept of place, and very strongly embedded in that. So the first part, I think, is still applicable to endorse the strategy. But I know, Peter Smith, you want to comment on the timing of the consultation.
I do, Chair, but I would like to say, first of all, I do support the drift of the strategy. I think it is the right approach, and in a sense, the comments Richard made on the last item and at the conference last Friday, that when Sir Howard spoke about the need for reform, it wasn't just simply in a public services context, it was the impact that it has on the whole economy, and I think we do need to always bear that in mind. If we're going to achieve anything in this area, we do need to do that. But I'm conscious, obviously, that by May we'll have a new governance structure, we'll have a new mayor. It may be that if we just delay the consultation for a couple of months, we can actually incorporate whatever the mayoral candidate's views are, which are probably not too different to ours, but there may be some slight nuances that we need to incorporate. So I suggest we just delay the consultation.
So thanks. So the proposal is that we endorse the strategy as is, but we delay the consultation until after May, and it's Alex Kanotis.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead with that suggestion. In doing so, it's also important, I think, for this strategy to also reflect and incorporate work that is also taking place elsewhere in the combined authority and also in member authorities. So, for example, the health and social care agenda, to ensure that that's adequately reflected in this strategy, and also the work that individual districts are doing that very much align with what's in this strategy. So I think in that time that's created by that pause, we can also feed in fantastic work streams that are going on elsewhere in GM and in individual authorities into the consultation draft.
Thanks very much. Any other comment? So I think the proposal effectively is to accept recommendation 1 and taking on board Councillor Gnotis's comments that and the proposal from Councillor Smith that we defer the consultation until after May. So that's agreed? That's agreed. Thank you. Item 15, the growth deal, round 3. Councillor Lees.
This is one of 4 reports dealing with growth deal round 3. Chair, this is the catch-all report. I think we can first of all express disappointment that having put forward a proposal for 566 million, we've been awarded 130 million. We of course have discussed this previously, but we can, I think, take a lot of credit that we have received the maximum that was allowed within the scheme and the biggest within the country. So this gives the overall shape of what we propose to do with growth deal round 3. This proposal has been endorsed by the LEP board when they met last week, and it's before us now for approval.
Thanks. So the recommendations as on the paper. Are there any comments? That's agreed. Yes, the recommendations are agreed to. So we move on to the first substantive item, or the second substantive item in the growth fund, the screen school. Councillor Lees. This
is a fantastic proposal, Chair. I guess that perhaps one issue might be in the name of the proposal, the International Screen School, because already lots and lots of people assume that this is simply about TV, film, video. It's very much more about everything that has a screen, which might include TV, film and video, but it's as much smartphones, laptops, tablets, smartphones and everything else now that has a digital base behind it, and we will see that in the range of offers within the International Screen School that reflects that. This, I think, is really an opportunity to put our digital industries, which is one of our growth sectors, really into a space to be able to accelerate. That it's hosted by Manchester Metropolitan University, which has a first-class record of recruiting students from across Greater Manchester, is a positive as well. So I'd recommend that we endorse this particular proposal.
Thanks very much. Are there any comments on that? There being none of the recommendations agreed, they're agreed. Thank you. So item 17, the Pankhurst Centre. Councillor Lees.
Again, we've identified health innovation as one of the growth areas for Greater Manchester, based on what is, I think, the biggest academic health campus in the country. between MRI and the University of Manchester. This is clearly the early phases of developing a major centre for research in health, technology and innovation. But I think confident that if we give this the start that's suggested here, that we'll be able to develop this as a major part of our health innovation offer.
Thanks. Is there any comments that being on the recommendations are agreed? They're agreed. Thank you. We move to item 18, the transport funding settlement, and I'm asking the Combined Authority to defer consideration of this in order that we can look once again at the prioritisation under this. So is the deferral agreed? That's agreed to. Thank you. Item 19, the growth deal, once again, the Tameside interchange. This item has already been before the Combined Authority for its outline, for its full business case. This simply now makes the money available to implement it. And I think probably the leader of Tameside Council will be disappointed if we didn't agree to this. The recommendation is outlined on the paper. Are there any comments? Is that agreed? It's agreed. Thank you very much. Item 20, the high-speed rail to route update and consultation. You will have noted that the legislation authorising the first part of high-speed rail 2 was passed. The part between London and the West Midlands. Obviously, it's absolutely vital for us that the route to the northwest, and indeed actually the route to up to Yorkshire and Humberside is completed as soon as possible. We know this is about economic growth, but it's also, frankly, if HS2 isn't developed, it would be about the strangulation of economic growth in Greater Manchester and the northwest. So it's a vital part of our infrastructure. But the report before us does make a number of points that I think we would want to see established before the final high-speed 2 plans begin to be put into legislative operation. And they consist of as follows. One concerns the chord, the decision to move the rolling stock depot from Golborne to Crewe has an important knock-on effect on the routing of the chord from the West Coast Main Line into Manchester. One of the demands in our response to the consultation is that chord should be reinstated as part of our own vital infrastructure to make sure that Greater Manchester can maximise the advantages of high speed 2. The second concerns the work that necessary around Piccadilly Station, which is the logical hub for Greater Manchester. However, because that hub will also service the I think Richard Least no longer likes the term HS3, the Northern Powerhouse Rail.
Chair, we have never called it HS3 in the north of England, apart from for one person. It's always either been Transpennine or Northern Powerhouse Rail.
Right, we'll go for Northern Powerhouse Rail as a matter of form from here on in. Because Northern Powerhouse Rail will also need to feed into Piccadilly, it's important that we have one operation which allows for the connectivities both of HS2 and any future development to be designed and planned all at the same time. And I think the third important item really concerns the position of Stockport, that whilst Stockport will not be a stop on the HS2 line, nevertheless, it's important that the position of Stockport as as part of the classic rail system be maintained, and those are substantive in the report that lies before us. So, on the basis of that, those comments, I hope that we can endorse the recommendations as they appear on the order paper. Are there any observations? So, the recommendations before us, those agreed? They're agreed. Thank you. So we turn to item 22, the devolution of the adult education budget. Sorry, 2021, forgive me, the Greater Manchester Public Sector apprenticeship approach. Alex, are you
Yeah, certainly am, Chair. Thank you very much. The report before us outlines the collaboration between public sector organisations in relation to the apprenticeship levy, working towards the 2.3% target for apprentices. And this is approximately represents £25 million a year available across Greater Manchester to support apprenticeship training and assessment. Won't go into a lot of detail, but we've as you'll see in the report, we split proposals into 4 work streams involving 1, workforce planning, 2, coordination and standardisation of the approach to apprenticeships, 3, consistency in recruitment and training and targeting gaps in our skill base, and 4thly, integration with private sector and non-public organisations in our overall approach. So I move the recommendations before us, Chair.
Thanks very much. I think Alex Kenotis.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to approve this. I would just emphasise that what we're doing here is agreeing the MOU for discussion, and we're also agreeing the work streams, because there is a considerable amount of work that we will need to do in order to get this right in terms of the detail, such as how the new frameworks we develop will actually maximise the apprenticeship levy. The issue of schools is very important, maintain schools, because we will rely on them to a very great extent in Greater Manchester to rolling this out, and there's a lot of work there I think that we need to develop. Issues to do with salaries and contract types across the sectors within the public sector, issues to do with common terms and conditions between, I don't know, councils, the health sector, police, fire, standardised job roles, and how we'll fund and roll out bespoke training. So I think the work streams are the right ones to identify. It's right to agree this MOU for discussion, but I would like to emphasise how much work is ahead for us to really maximise the benefit of the apprenticeship levy for the public sector in Greater Manchester and for those who partake in it.
Can I clarify what you're asking, if I may? You say to agree the MOU is a basis of discussion, so in that sense, at this stage, not to agree the content, but to note the content. Is that what you're proposing?
Yes, I think so. That was my understanding of the item. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, it's absolutely that. It's to note it for discussion.
Okay. It's just probably the recommendations are a bit more strongly worded than maybe it ought to be at this stage. So
sorry, Chair, it's discussion and sign-off is the wording now. So I'll be asked to approve it in that sense.
I think, Alex, the
sign-off is fine, as long as it can be quite clear that all the areas that I've identified and more, we still need to agree separately and develop that work.
Yeah, that's agreed. Yeah.
Okay. So on that basis, we're happy to endorse the recommendations as on the paper. Thanks very much. They're agreed. And now item 22, the devolution of the adult education budget, and Alex Williams.
Yep. Thank you again, Chair. This provides an update on the progress with the adult education budget in Greater Manchester. We're one of 9 areas to have a devolved AEB from 1819, and it comprises the previously separate funding streams of adult skills, community learning and learner support funding, and totals some £80 million in Greater Manchester, so a very significant sum. What I'm proposing here is to focus on ensuring that adults have the basis and core skills needed for work. It's around 17% of the overall skills budget, as Councillor Leese has alluded to earlier, and it is key, absolutely key, to public service reform in the conurbation. We want to move from measuring core starts and achievements, so a kind of volume-based approach, to outcome-based approach in terms of progression into further learning, sustainable employment and higher earnings, as well as qualifications. The demand for this budget, Chair, is clearly very high, so we are going to have to do a fair bit of work around prioritisation. And in that regard, we're working with providers looking to develop key aspects this year ahead of 1819. So this will very much be a shadow year, and we'll be looking at the what, the how, and the from whom we buy provision when these funding streams are devolved. The report before us outlines a timetable, and we anticipate that in the summer we will be able to accept the devolution of the adult education budget in agreement with DFE. So I'm asking the combined authorities to note the update, support officers in implementing this important piece of devolution, and support the overall principle that future funding decisions will be linked to the priorities of the GM outcomes framework. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alex. Peter Smith.
Yeah, can I support Alex on that? I think it's a really important report. I think we want to remember that what we're concerned with is the outcomes for the Greater Manchester economy and the outcomes for Greater Manchester people. I think we need to get that message through to some of our providers that you know, they're in the game to work for other people, not to actually work for themselves as institutions. And I think we could name them, but we won't embarrass them today by doing that. But I think it's a really important report, and Alex introduced it really well, that it's part of the reform programme. And in the future, we could well have a shortage of workers in this area if we're not able to import workers from the European Union in the past, as we have in the past. So clearly, these adults are going to be a key part of that thing. So it's got to be worked in. And I think also health has got a part to play in terms of making sure people are physically and mentally able to take part.
Thanks. Alex Kanotis.
Thanks. Fine with the substance of this. Just a procedural point. I understand that at the end of last year, individual councils were asked to consent to a protocol in relation to the exercise of adult education powers in order to allow this to take effect. Since then, we haven't heard anything further on it, so there is no protocol in place. So I'm just seeking a reassurance that that will be undertaken before this is rolled out later in the year.
Government is still working on it, is my understanding. So it still needs to be issued. So we're waiting for that.
Okay. So the recommendations are as on the order paper. Are those agreed? They're agreed. Thank you. And I can see why Sean Anstey is now absent. The item 23, the Greater Manchester Digital Talent and Skills Programme. Alex Williams.
Thank you again, Chair. Yeah, this is a proposal for a Greater Manchester Digital Talent and Skills Programme. It reflects our ambition as a combined authority to become a key centre to invest for businesses seeking a digitally skilled workforce outside of London. So what I'm asking the combined authority for is for approval to invest £2 million of existing skills capital local growth fund monies into revenue funding over 3 years to deliver this programme. Chair, there are 55,000 jobs in the digital and creative sector in the conurbation with an equivalent number of tech jobs across the wider economy. And if you look into some of the detail around productivity and salary levels in the digital sector, they're significantly higher than both average in GM and also the England and Wales average. So they're important jobs that we want to grow here in terms of boosting our productivity and higher salary jobs for our population. So there's huge demand for tech skills across every sector in our economy. So we're looking to, through these proposals, to tackle specific gaps in our skill base that are strategically important and that the market alone cannot tackle. 4 key objectives. Firstly, to move young people, to get more young people to take up digital learning and enter careers that require digital skills. Secondly, individuals to acquire digital skills and keep pace with technological change, which, if anything, is accelerating as we go forward. More people to progress into advanced digital apprenticeships. And fourthly, all our residents to have the basic digital skills required for basic social interaction, accessing public services and entering the labour market. So, Chair, I'm asking the combined authority to approve the £2 million of expenditure over 3 years, subject to our Treasurer being able to identify suitable revenue funds to substitute for the identified LGF capital funding, also to delegate authority to finalise the funding arrangements to Councillor Quinn and our Treasurer, and to delegate authority to Theresa Grant to approve the change to the programme as may be required for delivery. Thank you.
Any comments on this? So the recommendations are as on the order paper. Are those agreed? Those are agreed. So we move to item 24. I'd remind colleagues that there is, because the confidential, commercially sensitive information, there's a Part B item on the same subject, but I don't propose to go into the confidential section if nobody wants to raise anything that impinges on the confidentiality. And since nobody does, Councillor Quinn, do you want to introduce
Okay, yeah,
this?
thank you for that. It's again a long list of companies we've been helping through difficult times over many years. I think it's one of the great strengths of the Combined Authority, how we're using our funds to do that. This is a Bolton-based construction company employing over 400 people. Clearly, for a variety of reasons, it's faced some significant market challenges. The proposal is clearly before you that we support this company, and clearly I'll move the recommendation. I also have the fact that clearly the Great Manchester Pension Fund has also been part, I think, of the support mechanism in and around this company as well. You'll also find in the report some project updates for the company Applearn Limited, asking again for support around a fundraise for themselves. And then also an 800,000 loan to Incorporate Travel Management to improve the company's working capital, all again about how we support and help and grow our economy, and also safeguard jobs within our economy as well. I move the recommendations.
So, any comments? So the recommendations in item 24 and 26 are before us. Those agreed? Those are agreed. And that concludes the Combined Authority. And we'll move straight away on to the meeting of the joint meeting of the Combined Authority and the AGMA Executive Board. The apologies are as they were for the Combined Authority. There's no chair's announcements, declarations of interest. I repeat my comments before. The minutes of the joint board of January before us, are they approved? They're approved. The forward plan of strategic decisions are before us. Are they noted? They're noted. The minutes of the scrutiny pool of the 19th of February before us, are they noted? They're noted. And we come to item 7, the Greater Manchester Joint Scrutiny Pool's Task and Finish Group on communications. The report's obviously with us, but I want to welcome Councillor Angeliki Stoja, who led the Task and Finish Group. So, Angeliki, you have the floor to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. We have the power to change people's lives with the devolution deal. While I wrestle with the difficulties and the compromises of the deal in a tough financial environment, we have achieved a lot and we have lots to say. So the Task and Finish Group has found out about all of the things and all of the work that has been happening in the background, how we tell people about everything that we do. Previously, the Combined Authority was something that we used not to talk about, something in the background. With the devolution deal, what we do is in the limelight. Therefore, in terms of communications, we need to do more. Otherwise, we miss the opportunity to bring people, communities and businesses with us. So what we want, and to summarise key recommendations, is a clear strategy for communications and practical actions that go with it. We want the strategy to be informed by the members' knowledge about the messages out in the community, what gets the messages out in the community, and what gets people talking, what people talk about. We want a strategy that works with people. Politics, as most of you will know, is a contact sport. We need to be using all of our assets as members, as politicians, media and organisations that work with communities to amplify our message and our voice. And lastly, we need to measure our effectiveness. These are the key asks that the committee has put forward for you to consider and for me to ask you to endorse. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, I've got to say as well, I think first of all, thank you for the work that you and your colleagues on the Task and Finish Group put into this report, and it's a vindication in practice of the value of scrutiny. We certainly share the ambitions that you have come forward with, and perhaps it's helpful if I can say that some of the items that you refer to are already underway. The refresh of the strategic communications plan has been completed. That presumably will be before the scrutiny pool for your March meeting. The review of the resources, specifically around staffing and funding, is being completed. and the obviously the development of the Greater Manchester Elects website is on the go. But nevertheless, the report contains more detail than that. That detail will now be taken on board, and we will make use of this in determining how we move forward with our joint objective, but also look forward, obviously, to the Scrutiny Committee's review of the most latest communications plan. So, if I can thank you, Councillor Sturgeon, for your work, and as I say, I repeat what I said, that this is a vindication of the need for the scrutiny process to be effective and to be properly structured. This allows that to continue into the future. So thank you for being here with us today. That report, the recommendations are before us. Are those agreed? Those are agreed. Thank you. Item 8, the appointment of the Chief Information Officer and the Chief Resilience Officer, they've been deferred to a later stage. So we move to item 9, the Greater Manchester Housing Providers Update. Councillor Farnell.
Thanks, Chair. I think we all recognise that to deliver our target for growth and new homes in the spatial strategy, it will not be delivered by volume house builders alone. We'll need the combined efforts of a wide range of developers, big and small. A key contributor will be Greater Manchester social housing providers. There is already a strong relationship between councils and social housing landlords. And this partnership is key to providing the right mix of housing in the future, particularly the different types of social and affordable housing that we need. We already have a memorandum of understanding in place with the Greater Manchester Housing Partnership, which represents 27 social housing providers. And before members today is the delivery plan. It has a target of delivering 2,000 new homes a year and an ambition to go even further, up to 3,000 homes new homes built every year. To do this, it'll need a real effort from local authorities and our housing partners combined. And particularly in identifying land supply and land availability and securing the resources that we need in what we all know are difficult economic times. The delivery plan also sets out key priorities for enhancing skills and training opportunities and improving the health and social care for residents and customers. With your permission, Chair, can I introduce Kath Green, the Chief Executive of First Choice Homes Oldham, and she's here representing the partnership. She's going to just highlight a few of the key aspects of the delivery plan, and she'll answer any difficult questions that you may have.
Thank you. No pressure there then, Councillor Farnell. Just wanted to highlight a few of the kind of progress we've made, because we've gone from policy development and agreeing principles and ways of working to actual delivery and tangibles, and I think that's what this delivery plan starts to do. There's also some other policy developments in there, and you can see, I would say we're about 60-65% of the way there in terms of where I think we should be. So there's still a lot more to do in terms of the understanding. But I think just some of the key things, because it is about tangible outcomes and not just about talk. We've now had indicative allocations of £120 million across Greater Manchester in terms of the housing providers, which will deliver 4,000 homes within that particular period from the Homes and Communities Agency's funding programme. But in addition to that, housing providers are putting their own resources in. As you'll see from the report, our ambition is to build 12,000 homes over that same period. So, we are very much feeling that we are part of the growth strategy for Greater Manchester, as well as the reform strategy as well. Interestingly, the national allocation from the Homes and Community Agency has not been spent or fully allocated. There's over £1.4 billion left in the pot, and with the continuous market engagement process, we are intending to continue to work on bringing other schemes and processes forward, which leads on to the potential partnership we're looking to develop through a joint venture between our collective selves about how we might get a bit smarter about doing some of this and getting our kind of collective act together, if you like, to be on the front foot for some of that. So I think that is really important. And the other issue is in the current round, there wasn't funding for affordable rents. However, we do know going forward that there will be. So the allocations we've got are for shared ownership, rent to buy and that sort of product. So I think that is us saying, you know, we've done quite a lot of work in the last 6 months in terms of what we said we would do, and we're doing it. So I think that is really, really important. The second point, and it picks up on a number of other items actually, is about employment training and skills. You will be aware that we've developed a vehicle between ourselves which is called Athena, and it's a model where we can actually channel funding through so we can collectively get better outcomes for our residents. And we've been allocating £9.6 million to look at better opportunities for our residents. And I don't need to tell anybody in this room that residents in social housing are predominantly have more difficult sort of chances in terms of skills and employment. So we're really pleased about that. And that programme is, if I was you, saying I'd like some more stuff on that when you're getting up to the delivery stage. So I think that is good. But we've also invested £1.6 million worth of our own resources into apprenticeships across the board. So I think that is really important as well. And in 2015-16, we helped 7,000 residents across Greater Manchester get into training or work. So I think, again, that is us using our sort of corporate social responsibility as well in terms of being a contributor to that training, skills and employment. There's some real tangibles there on the low carbon agenda. Now, if I was being really honest with you, I would say we've kind of taken our eye off this a bit, but we've had some real support from Robin Lawler, who's the Chief Executive of Northwoods, to bring it back on our agenda. We've had a massive amount of kind of solar panels and cavity wall insulation, but it's about innovation. So there's a number of projects that I've identified in the report there, which we think are fairly innovative, and who can, if they've got an expert, great, you can tell me that, but there's some real tangible outcomes there as well. So the partnership there, we agreed at our core group meeting yesterday that we're putting quite a bit more effort onto the low carbon agenda as well, so more to come on that. One of the big pieces of work we agreed in the MOU is looking at the future form and function of social housing. I mean, most of you will remember, like, council housing was like for hard-working class people in the past, but over time things have changed. Properties are, not meeting decent homes. We've taken properties out. Demographics are changing. So there's a big piece of work there about looking at what the future form and function of social housing is. And Councillor Farnell and the interim mayor have been very supportive of the work that we've been doing on there. And there's a task and finish group set up between ourselves, and we've got colleagues from New Economy on there as well, helping us, advising us on the evidence base and so on. So there's more to come on that, about what that might look like. No tangible outcome as yet, but it's really looking about what the future should be. Just a couple of other things I'd like to, if I may, is really on the reform side. I mean, we've been doing lots of work on the place-based work, which is being led by Donna Hall in terms of the officer team, and she's been incredibly supportive about engaging housing providers in that whole concept. And some housing providers are now leading on some of the early adopters. And obviously there was the event in February which was looking about taking that forward and getting that more mainstreamed, and rather not project and piloting, about getting that sorted. And I suppose a couple of final things would be about the health and social care. We said we would identify 3 priorities for housing providers to scale up, which we believe we could scale up across Greater Manchester to make an impact. And that was housing options for older people, warm homes and hospital discharge. It's patchy across in terms of how many are actually doing it, but they are doing it, and that's the important thing. And more importantly, for those housing providers who are engaging in this, we're running evaluation as well to see, proving the concepts that we're actually sort of getting off the ground. And the final point I would make really is around the workforce development. We've been really aligning and supporting the work about the Greater Manchester. What does a good leader look like in terms of the workforce? So we've been agreeing with our own organisations to adopt the principles that the Combined Authority have adopted on workforce development. and we've had a number of colleagues from housing providers going through the master classes and so on. So there's a lot going on. This is kind of the first 6 months in terms of when you approve the MOU. There's a lot more in there, but I'll pause there and take any questions.
Thanks very much, Kath. Any observations, Peter?
Yeah, no, I want to thank Carol for that report and the good efforts that are being done. I think the opportunities you're giving for local residents are really important. Training opportunities, linking back to the report Alex was giving earlier on apprentices. I think we need all that to come out. So, I think your housing provider is doing a good job, but in a sense you come with a social conscience. A lot of the building firms who are operating across Greater Manchester don't have the same social conscience. They don't do the same things that you do. And I wonder whether, Chair, on the back of this, we should be thinking about how we link the principles that we'd all share with Carol described across the piece to make sure that as we invest in the reconstruction of Greater Manchester, that we actually achieve social objectives as well as the physical changes that we want to do. So I would suggest if we ask for a report to come back to us to see what is possible in terms of some kind of protocol arrangements with our builders to make sure we do get more social objectives as well as the building ones.
Before I bring Richard and Kath in, anybody else want to comment? Actually, just a comment from me. I mean, first of all, I want to endorse Councillor Smith's views. I mean, in actual fact, it's also about the things like employment standards within the construction industry, which has a checkered history. I think it'd be kind to say. And obviously, the housing providers can give some real guidance. Very much welcome your comments actually though, about the low carbon agenda, because we know we've got to drive that agenda forward in Greater Manchester. We know, in fact, the overwhelming majority of greenhouse gases produced do actually at the moment come from domestic heating, and we know that the bulk of properties into the indefinite future, certainly by 2050, as an horizon where we've got to hit national and international low carbon targets, that those properties are already built. So we are talking about what we do about retrofitting existing properties. So working together on that, I think, is important. You might want to comment, Richard and Kath, on those. But the final point I would want to make, though, simply is that I think on behalf of the Combined Authority, we would want to say to the housing providers that we thank them for the work they've done, because there's no doubt that you and your colleagues have helped us to drive our agenda, but you've been driving your own agenda forward in a way that's good for the people of Greater Manchester. Richard doesn't want to comment. Kath, do you want to say something? Thanks very much. Well, the recommendations are as in the order paper. Are those agreed? Those are agreed, and that concludes this meeting. Can I just remind you that there's a photograph just over by the door on your right. If you follow Donna, she'll lead you like Pied Piper like.